Hello, I'm Ken Jabert with the Orange County Library System here at the Hiawassee Branch in Orlando, Florida, on January the 10th, 2013, capturing memories from our community. Please tell us your name and where you're from.
My name is Barbara Jeanette Anderson, and I'm from Orlando, Florida.
Now, you're the first person that I've talked to that was actually born and raised here in Orlando. So you are a native.
Correct. My ancestry goes back to the 1780s in the state of Florida.
And so both your parents and grandparents are from around here as well?
On my mother's side of the family, we go back to the 1780s. On my mother's father's side, my grandfather was first generation in this country and in this state. His mother came to this country from Germany, and his father came to this country from France. My father's family came by ticket of Uncle Sam during World War II. and so he was from Alabama.
So you were born here in Orlando. Where were you born?
I was born at what is now Herndon Airport. During World War I and World War II, that was an Army Air Force base. And my father was stationed there. And there was a hospital there. And I was born there. And my father used to like to tease me and tell me that after I was born there, they tore the building down so that mistake couldn't be made again. So my younger brother had to be, he was born at what they used to call Florida Sanitarium, which is now Florida Hospital. And it was a wooden, it looked like a large southern wooden house with a huge porch.
And what area of town did you grow up in?
During my young years, we lived, when we were in Florida, downtown Orlando. And in fact, my parents lived over on Hillcrest whenever I was born. My kindergarten was across the street from what is the public library, and it was in a frame house there, and there's, I believe, a law office there now. And my playground at that time, we would walk over to Lake Eola, and I used to sketch pictures of the fountains. My first grade, I went to Hillcrest Elementary. And that school burned down after I was grown. My father called me to let me know my school had burned down. I was living in Gainesville then. And then while my parents were living in Orlando, there was an initiative on the ballot to tax ourselves, or them, people, for raising money for schools, because Orange County was taking over all the rural schools. And the idea was that they were going to build new schools in the rural areas. So my parents, of course, voted for this since they had bought property. Actually, my mother had bought property during World War II on taxes while my father was gone serving this country in India. And so later, since he had been offered a job before the war was over, Mr. Mather from Mather's Furniture Store had apparently told quite a few servicemen that the war was going to be over soon, and when they got out, to check with him, and he would give them a job. And apparently my father was the only one that took him up on it. And he did give my father a job, and my father worked there longer than he really wanted to.
And where was the Mather's Furniture Store located where your father worked?
The first one was downtown there at Church Street, next door to Bumby Hardware Store. And I used to love to go into that hardware store because it was wooden. Of course, I had to get permission from my parents to run in there. But it had wooden, I can't say plank floors, but wooden sections that they could pick up. And they just swept the dirt, dust, and all through the cracks of that wood that used to. But anyway, it was like going into a museum. Anything that hadn't sold, it still stayed up on the walls, hanging up in there, and there was so much artifacts from the cowboy days, the settlements of the early history of this area. And so I used to like to go in there. And then the main store was on Pine Street. And later, over the years, as things deteriorated in downtown Orlando, those stores closed, and the company moved more further and further closer to 441 in different stores.
And where did you go to junior high school in the area?
Well, let me go back and say that my parents moved out to Orla Vista. The house I'm living in today, my father built in the late 1940s. And when I say built, he built it with his own hands, concrete block.
And that's still the house you live in today?
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing.
And he, like I said, he built that house, and we moved out there when I was in second grade. It was important to my mother for my brother to start school there, and she didn't want us to be scattered here and there. So that's where I started second grade. That was when I went there, it was I guess a 4-room building, and then another building that was 2 rooms that had first grade in the lunchroom. And whenever I was old enough for 4th grade, there were too many students. So my 4th grade and they had not finished building the new school building that the taxes had been, they'd been collecting since before I started school. And so my 4th grade class was over at the Orla Vista Chamber of Commerce, which is on Normandale, or was on Normandale, I should say. And it was a wooden structure that was built, and I won't quote the group that built it, but it was one of those WPA projects, youth projects, to give people work. And that building is gone now because Orla Vista was going to lose its fire department. I know I'm skipping here, but it's important that you know this. Orla Vista was going to lose its fire department, and in order to keep a fire department in that community, they gave up most of their land. They gave up all their land they had there with the Chamber of Commerce to keep that fire department in the community. So the Chamber of Commerce now meets in the old volunteer fire department building. And if you ever go inside that building, you'll see the poles where the 3 trucks pulled in to that building. But getting back to where I went to school, so I finished 6th grade there and went on to Howard Middle School, which used to be the old Orlando High School, which my mother and her older sister both graduated from that school. Then in 8th and 9th grade, I went to Memorial Junior High School. And, I should say Howard, at the time that I went there, had over 2,000 students, and that was the largest junior high school population in the state of Florida at that time.
And where did you go to high school?
So then after going to Memorial, I should say I was in band and a majorette and all that kind of stuff. So I had a wonderful time at Memorial. And in those days, life was not like it is today. And we had many freedoms at Memorial that you cannot give children today. You had 2 choices for lunch, a hot lunch or a cold lunch, or a 3rd choice, go off campus and go to one of the little delis, cafes in that area. For civics class in the 9th grade, we used to walk over to the courthouse and see the different court cases going on. And if you were interested in a case and it had not finished, you could tell your classmates that you wanted to stay to see it finish, and they would tell your next teacher, and then you would just walk back to school. You were trusted, and you were trusted to get your work done and be responsible. But we live in a different world and a different society today. But I am so very, very thankful that I had that freedom.
You went to high school.
And so then later, I went to Edgewater High School in 10th and 11th grade, and enjoyed those years there. Again, I had an awful lot of freedom there. Then they opened Evans High School, and I thought, well, I should go there because for the first time I'm going to be able to go to a school close to home, and we should support the local school. I'm glad I did, but I left so many friends at Edgewater, and Evans was not prepared for us. The school was not finished, and so the first 9 weeks or so, the classes were half days, and junior high half the day, and high school.
And what year was this, the year at Evans High School?
That would have been in 1959 and 1960. So I was a member of the first graduating class from Evans High School. When I was attending Edgewater, Edgewater was so overly crowded, and I know you will find it hard to believe, but Seminole County did not have that much of a population, nor that many schools, and they actually paid Orange County funds to educate their high school students, and so they actually bused students from South Seminole County to Edgewater, and Edgewater was overly crowded. The last year I was there, our classes, they actually had 7:30 classes in order to get everybody in. It seems like there was only like 3 high schools in Seminole County at that time. I know that seems hard to believe. And the largest school was in Sanford, which I had a cousin that went there, so that's the reason I'm. And speaking of Sanford, up until the late 50s, early 60s, 1792 was just a 2-lane road going from Maitland to Sanford, and I made that trip many times with my family, and you would not pass more than 6 buildings after you left Maitland till you got to the city limits of Sanford. And my uncle, great uncle August, part of his property is now part of the airport that is there now, Orlando Airport there.